Ready?
Ready.
Okay, I'm John Kraft.
Kirk Allen.
We are the Edgar County Watchdogs, and today we're going to discuss some things with the state of Illinois and Governor Pritzker's executive orders and the, what's the name of that act? The Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act, and your rights under the act.
That's it's amazing that they haven't actually told anybody what the real enforcement process is. And we've uncovered some stuff that we've actually shared with some attorneys, and they were quite pleased to get the information. What we found, we see in the executive orders that the governor has pointed to law enforcement and police, local police, state police, fire departments, things like that that can actually enforce the executive order. Well, the problem is, under the Emergency Management Agency Act, Section 18, Paragraph B, every emergency service and disaster agency established pursuant to this act and the coordinators thereof shall execute and enforce the orders, rules, and regulations as may be made by the governor under the authority of this act. So the agencies that are given the absolute enforcement power are those created under the act. And who's created under the act?
Oh, where would I find that?
Right at the very beginning of the act. Paragraph.
Oh, that must be this piece of paper.
Paragraph 1, I believe.
To create an Illinois Emergency Management Agency.
So the act creates the agency. The powers to exercise enforcement lies within Section 18, Paragraph B.
Well, it creates the agency to authorize emergency management programs within the political subdivisions of the state.
Right.
So it creates the agency for that purpose.
Right. And part of their delegated authority, they are established under the act, shall execute and enforce the orders, rules, and regulations as may be made by the governor under authority of this act. So the powers given to the governor under Section 7, the emergency powers, are powers under this act, and the enforcement authority is the Emergency Management Agency Act. It doesn't say state police, it doesn't say county sheriffs, it doesn't say health departments, it doesn't say any of that. It says exactly who the authority is. So now that we've got that taken care of, so when somebody comes and tells you you got to do something, ask them if they're from the Emergency Management Agency, because that's who has the power to enforce those executive orders.
So, well, let's start with this. I'm from the local health department, and I am here to tell you to cease your operations.
Oh, great. Now what?
Well, know your rights.
This is Illinois. We got rights
Well, everybody's got rights.
in Illinois?
And you also have the right to be wrong.
That's true. Who's telling you that you have to close your doors? We hear so-and-so told us we have to close down, or the police stopped by and told us we need to close. You need to identify who's telling you this stuff. There's a lot of different provisions in the health department code when it comes to restaurants, and they can shut you down for different violations within that, just as they could before COVID ever came. We want to address the situation as it relates to this current pandemic. The power of a health department to close a person's business is found in 20 ILCS 2305/2 B and /2C.
We'll have links to this in the article.
You bet. Those two provisions is where they get their power to close. Due process. We got due process in Illinois?
Yes, certainly.
Under our state constitution, if I do recall.
And the United States Constitution.
You bet.
So what do you do when you get served?
Well, you got two options. When you say served, what do you mean?
Well, okay. What do you do when you get handed papers that say we're ordering you to close for this reason?
Well, you can voluntarily close, which most have done to date, or you can invoke your rights to due process.
And that goes even as just as a verbal warning?
Well,
That they walk in and say close down?
absolutely.
Okay.
I'm gonna invoke my due process rights, because there's only the process of closing them down is spelled out in the law, and I quote, the government has the burden to prove, quote, by clear and convincing evidence must prove that the public's health and welfare are significantly endangered by a person or group of persons that is suspected of having, that has been exposed to, or that is reasonably believed to have been exposed to dangerous, contagious, or infectious disease. So they have to have evidence to support that they're going to close you. And there's a process for that. It's spelled out in the statute, your due process rights. They have to go to court and get a court order to close you down if you choose to ignore their verbal request. So that's a simple process. Hey, we're not attorneys, but every attorney we've talked to laughs when they read what's going on, because this is the process. And the one attorney down south that has written roughly 80 letters exercising these rights on their client, not one county state's attorney has taken action to close those businesses. And we know why, because they don't have any evidence to close them.
And that action has to be taken within 48 hours of the notice.
Right, they got 48 hours to get the court order from the time they told you to close. That's your due process.
Even if they close you on a Friday night, that means they got to get that order. Is it business hours?
I'd have to go back and double check on whether it says business or 48 hours. I think it says 48 hours.
It might still default to business hours, which I mean,
Yeah.
business day is not actual number of hours during the business day. It probably means 48 hours, I would assume means 2 business days, but we can check on that.
Right.
So what if somebody knocks on the door and says, I'm from the police and I'm here to tell you to cease your operations?
Well, my first question is, what agency created your police department? How were you created? If they weren't created under the Emergency Management Act, they don't have enforcement powers. They weren't delegated enforcement powers.
Yes, but I also understand that if they're on your front door, do you comply and fight about it later?
I think every situation is going to be different. We saw a video today where the officers came into the guy's business and he said, can I help you? And they said, well, are you open? He says, well, I don't have to answer your questions. Am I under arrest? Am I being detained? They said, no. It's okay, well, I don't have anything else to say. And they said, all right, have a good day. And they walked out.
All right.
And we have got to stop being intimidated by the very people that are supposed to serve the public. Just because they're at your door saying something doesn't make it right. We have to hold them accountable, and there's a process. I recommend ask the government official to provide you the required legal notice to close your doors. If that's what they're there to do, they've got to provide you the required legal notice.
In writing.
Do not accept verbal requests or demands. Demand they put their demands in writing. I mean, if someone's going to tell me I'm going to close, you're going to get a speeding ticket, what do they give you? Verbal? Is that a verbal warning?
I wish.
I wouldn't know, I haven't gotten a ticket. But anyway, they put it in writing. It's the same if they come to close your business. And then I would ask for the actual law that they allege you're violating. What do you violate? What have you done wrong? They have to cite that. Most of them are going to say that they're enforcing the governor's executive orders. Well, the only people that have the power to enforce the executive orders is under the Emergency Management Act, specifically 20 ILCS 3305/18 paragraph B. We'll put that link up also in the article.
So what is the Liquor Control Commission?
This is one we're hearing a lot about, where the state is threatening to take people's liquor license if they open up. We encourage people to read the law. It's very straightforward. It's easy to read. This is from the Liquor Commission in one of their executive summaries regarding these powers. Quote, since the governor's executive orders are made pursuant to Emergency Management Agency Act and not the Liquor Control Act, a violation of them being the executive orders, is not a violation of the Liquor Control Act or its rules that would allow the commission to suspend or revoke a license. So they have no grounds to take your license over an executive order violation that, by the way, they have to prove in court that you violated some order. Just because they say you did doesn't mean you did. If they threaten to take your liquor license, under 235 ILCS 5/7-5, and this is a quote, however, no such license shall be so revoked or suspended, and no license shall be fined except after a public hearing by the local Liquor Control Commission with a 3-day written notice to the licensee, affording the licensee an opportunity to appear and defend. Due process.
Yeah, that's right.
It's also governed under the Illinois Administrative Code 100.30. Interesting section in there. Violations of federal law, state law, or city, village, or county ordinance or regulations. That's what they can enforce. An executive order is not a state law. Legislatures make law, not governors and not executive orders. It says nothing about executive orders as a grounds for any type of action they can take against you. There's also a section on violations in that Liquor Control Act. It tells you what is a violation. If you're doing something that is in violation of the Liquor Control Act, then yeah, they can take action, but they can't revoke your license without your due process rights.
So what if I have a barber shop? I need to go to one, by the way.
I think we all need to go to one.
I don't need to go to a cosmetologist, but I do need to go to a barber shop.
Well, this is a real interesting one because of what just happened in Texas. The woman spent 2 days in jail standing up for her employees and for her due process rights. And it's really amazing. But anyway, as it relates to Illinois, again, you got to know what your rights are. And if you actually read in the statute, and again, we'll put this statute up, it's 225 ILCS 410/1-6. Administrative Procedure Act. It points to the process of action they can take, and they point to section 10-65 of the Illinois Administrative Procedure Act. Quote, except as provided in subsection C, no agency shall revoke, suspend, annul, withdraw, amend materially, or refuse to renew any valid license without first giving written notice to the licensee of the facts or conduct upon which the agency will rely to support its proposed action, and an opportunity for a hearing in accordance with the provisions of this act concerning contested cases. Back to due process. They can't just take your license. It doesn't work that way. You have to have been doing something that would violate the law. In that 225 ILCS, section 4-7 outlines a list, and it's actually 3 pages long, of violations. If you're violating any of those things, they can take your license, they can fine you, they can suspend you. But 2 in particular that are really interesting in it was 4-7-1F, failing within 60 days to provide information in response to a written request made by the department. So if they come and say, hey, we're going to take your license, you got your due process rights. If you don't answer in 60 days, you could lose your license. And then under J, continued practice by a person knowingly having an infectious or contagious disease. Knowingly
having, as in present tense.
Right. They don't know you're sick. They have no evidence that you're sick. They have no grounds to take your license. That's the same process with the Department of Public Health. And in relation to actual enforcement, the executive orders are enforced by, as the law defines, by the Emergency Management Agency. The Department of Public Health is actually allowed to enforce the pandemic plan within the state law, within their health department laws. That's a whole separate matter. They have that enforcement power. They could come and say, I think you're sick, you need to shut down. Then you have to go through the process of, you got to prove I'm sick. You got to go get a court order to prove it. State's attorneys aren't doing it because they can't prove it. So people need to really do a deep dive, which isn't really that deep, is it? No. It took us about 15 minutes to put this together. We've been preaching this since March 15th in our first article on due process rights. Don't let these people walk all over you. Stand your ground respectfully. Do the right thing. We're not here to say this isn't a problem from a health standpoint. People are getting sick. People are dying. But common sense has to come into play, and we don't lose our due process rights in an emergency.
No.
Anything else?
Other than we're not attorneys, we don't give legal advice. Seek advice from a competent attorney.
Sounds good. We challenge anybody to disprove what we said.
All right.
Thank you much. Have a good day. Stay safe.